Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, or lover of living, it does not matter. Our journey is not a caravan of despair. Come, come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times. Come, yet again, come, come. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I offer thanks to the Almighty Allah, who has always guided us in this world and hereafter, and who is the source of every beneficent, every magnificent bounty. Allah is indeed the beneficent. He is the most merciful, and to Him belongs all praise. Now, I would like to start with a couplet from Rumi and on importance of Mathnewi. And Rumi says, "The Mathnewi is a tale for him who call it as such. However, he who appreciates its value is real man." Now, today I would like to talk about the importance of Mathnewi. Why is Mathnewi considered as an important book even today? Mathnewi was written 700 years ago, and since then people have been reading Mathnewi over and over again. And today even in the 21st century, Mathnewi is one of the famous books in the East and in the West. And I would like to dedicate this talk about the importance of Mathnewi and how we should read Mathnewi. And let's start with the meaning of Mathnewi. What is Mathnewi? What is Mathnewi? Mathnewi, when we look at the term itself, it means rhyme and couplets. In poetry, it's used as rhyme and couplets. So there are so many Mathnewis, there are so many rhyme and couplets that were written in different times by different poets. And but today, when we say Mathnewi, when we say the Mathnewi, people firstly recognize Rumi's work. People remember Rumi's Mathnewi, and that's why the Mathnewi became the well-known book all over the world. So Mathnewi itself is the most famous book of Rumi, and it has always been considered as an important book throughout the history. It has been always considered as an important book for literature, for history, and it has been an important book for personal, mental, spiritual, and professional and social development. Now, there is Aflaki. Aflaki is one of the important scholars who has studied the life of Rumi extensively, and he has written commentaries over Rumi's life and over Rumi's works, especially the Mathnewi. And he says this. He says, "By God, I swear to God, from the place where the sun rises to the place where the sun sets down, the deep and spiritual meaning of the words of the Mathnewi will take place and spread around the world." So from the place where the sun rises to the place where the sun sets down, the words of the Mathnewi, these deep and spiritual meanings of the Mathnewi will spread around the people. So, and Aflafi continues, it will travel all to climates, and it will travel around the regions of the world. And there will be hardly any meeting or gathering where these words of Mathnewi will not be recited. So in almost every meeting on love, on Allah, on religion, there will be Rumi's name will be mentioned, and there will be stories shared from Rumi, and people will be reflecting back on these stories, and they will try to learn from these stories. And Raflafi continues, our deep and spiritual meanings and secrets will extend down and seize the world. And in that time, Mathnewi will act as a guide. So people will be reading the Mathnewi all over the world. People will be sharing stories from Mathnewi and its importance all over the world. But why do we read Mathnewi? Why do we share stories from Mathnewi? Because Mathnewi should act as a guide. It should act as a guide for human beings, and it should we should be able to draw lessons and moral codes, moral lessons from Mathnewi. And Rumi also talks about the role of Mathnewi. He realizes that the book will be an important source of inspiration for future generations. And he says, you know, Rumi says, if you read a single page of our book, if you read a single page from Mathnewi, you'll become amazed and wonder what. So when you read one story from Mathnewi, when you read one verse from the Mathnewi, you will become amazed, you will feel surprised, and you will love it. You will love the poetry there. You will love the moral code, the moral message that's given there. And you will be amazed and wonder what. And Rumi continues, if you attend a moment to the lesson of the heart, you can draw teachers to your own education. What does he mean? He says, if you attend a moment to the lesson of the heart, after you read this story, you should start thinking about the meaning of the story. Don't just read this story at a superficial level. Look for the deeper meaning behind each story. So that's why he says, if you attend a moment to the lesson of the heart, you should start asking questions. What is Rumi trying to convey behind each story? What is he trying to say in each story? What is his message? What is his purpose telling this story? Don't read the story at a superficial level. Maybe the story may sound good, and you may enjoy the story when you read the story. You may enjoy the poetry, you may enjoy the rhyme and couplets in each story, but don't look at the superficial level. Look for the deeper meaning in each story. Look for the message that Rumi wants to convey to people, and at that moment you will be able to draw lessons for your own benefit, for your own life. And Rumi continues. He says, when we pass away, our time in this world is limited. But he says, he realized that when we pass away, when we leave this world, Mathnewi will be there. Mathnewi is for generations. And he says, the Mathnewi takes on guidance. Read Mathnewi, and it will take on guidance. This is guidance, but is it a guidance for everyone? Is it a guidance for every single individual? Is it a guidance for every single reader? No, he says, it will guide the seekers of truth. It will guide the seekers of truth, and it will lead them to high levels. So if you're looking for deeper meaning, if you're looking for truth, if you are not at the superficial level, if you're looking for the deeper meaning, if you're looking for the moral code that Rumi wants to convey to people, then Mathnewi will be a guide. Mathnewi will guide people, and Mathnewi will always guide seekers of truth, and it will always guide them to higher levels. And ultimately, finally, it will lead them to attainment of their ultimate goal, which is Allah. And that's why Mathnewi will always guide them on their spiritual journey. It will help them understand the deeper meaning of the Quran. It will help them, it will help people to understand the deeper meaning, the deeper meaning of the Sunnah, the way of the Prophet. And it will guide them. It will guide them, it will convey them moral messages about interaction among human beings, about our spiritual life, our religious life, our social life, and Mathnewi will be always there for these deeper meanings. And the following verse that I will read, or the following couplet that I will read, was actually written on the cover, an old copy of the Mathnewi. And in that room it says, I have not dictated the Mathnewi to be memorized. I have not dictated the Mathnewi to be memorized. So he says, the book of Mathnewi is not for memorization. Don't memorize every single couplet. Don't memorize every single story. Don't memorize every single fable. It's not a book of memorization. In other words, it's not a book of poetry. It's not a book that should be read on a day of poetry. It's not only a book for memorization. It's not a book of recitation. He says, but I intended the Mathnewi to be a spiritual ladder for the lovers of Allah. It is a book for spiritual journey. It's a spiritual bridge between the human being and his lover, and his Allah. And Mathnewi should be understood as a connection maker between the human being and the Allah. And that's why don't memorize every single couplet in Mathnewi. Don't memorize them. Try to understand the deeper meaning, the spiritual meaning that Rumi wants to convey in his book, in his stories. Sultan Veled also talks about the importance of Mathnewi. Sultan Veled was his biggest son, and he writes at the end of book 6. And he says, the Mathnewi is the ladder of hearts. Whoever climbs this ladder reaches the roof. So similarly, he says the book of Mathnewi is the ladder of hearts. It's the ladder of spiritual connection. It's the ladder of spiritual journey. And whoever climbs on this ladder, whoever joins this spiritual journey, they will be able to reach the roof. But what is the roof? And Sultan Veled continues to explain. He says, this roof is not the roof of blue sky. It's not the roof that we see on the sky. It's much more than that. This roof is superior to the heavens, and it's higher than the heaven. This roof that we're talking about, this roof that this ladder will take us to, is not the roof of blue skies. The roof is much higher than the heavens, and it's superior to heavens. And what does he mean? He says, when you take on this journey, when you take on this spiritual journey with Mathnewi, you will be able to enjoy the taste of Ma'rifatullah, the taste of Muhabbatullah. What is that? Ma'rifatullah. Ma'rifatullah is the knowledge of Allah. You know more of Allah. You know more about His qualities, His benefits, His givings to humankind. And Muhabbatullah, it's the love of Allah. And when you are on this journey, you are able to get closer to Muhabbatullah, the love of Allah. Ala bi dhikrillahi tadma'innal qulub. Your heart will be only satisfied with the remembrance of Allah. So when you are on a journey with the Mathnewi, when you are able to draw spiritual lessons from Mathnewi, you will be able to satisfy your heart. Your heart will be able to enjoy the satisfaction of Allah, the satisfaction of love for Allah. And this is the ladder. When you talk about the Mathnewi, he says, the Mathnewi is the ladder of hearts. This is the ladder that will take us to the end. So we mentioned in the beginning of the lecture, we said the Mathnewi was written almost 700 years ago, and since then the Mathnewi is one of the famous books, famous books in the East and in the West. And people today reading it have the feeling that this book actually was written today, or they feel that this book was written for them because they feel so close to the stories. And why is that? Because Rumi actually presents all of his knowledge and experiences in this book. Rumi was one of the prominent scholars at the time. Let's not forget that. He was the son of one of the prominent scholars. He was the son of Sultanul Ulama. He was the son of one of the biggest scholars of the time. He was educated by his father, and after his father passed away, he was educated in major cities, in Damascus and in other educational cities, and he was a prominent scholar. And after his meeting with Shams, he became a Sufi master as well. And Rumi presents all of his knowledge, all of his Islamic knowledge, all of his Sufi knowledge and experiences in the Mathnewi, so people can take lessons from them and rely on them for meditation. So people reading the Mathnewi years later, centuries later, can rely on Mathnewi, can rely on the messages given by Rumi in the Mathnewi for meditation, for tafakkur, for tadhakkur, for thinking about God, thinking about religion, thinking about Sufism. So Mathnewi was written in Persian, in the Persian language, but a high number of translations and commentaries were made in Turkish and in other languages as well. And its English translation, its English publication has sold more than the publication in other languages. And why? Why is Mathnewi still one of the famous books, one of the important books, or one of the important reference books all over the world? And the answer probably lies behind the words of Ahmet Cevdet Pasha. Ahmet Cevdet Pasha was a lawyer and a prominent politician in the Ottoman time in the 19th century, and he was also the author of Mecelle. It's one of the first modern constitutions of Ottoman Empire, and he took part in the preparation of Mecelle. And he says, when he talks about the importance of Mathnewi, he says this: every century, every period has a special language. Every century has a special language, and the Mathnewi is every period's, every century's language. And that's why Mathnewi is one of the books that is being read all over the world. And actually the main reason why this great work, why Mathnewi continues to draw attention in every century, in every region, is that it was written by one of the prominent, one of the greatest masters. It was written by one of the greatest Sufis. And this Sufi, who is Rumi, is the master of the heart. He's the Sufi of heart, and since he is the Sufi of heart, he is able to bring people together, and his book still continues to bring people together from all over the world. And that's why Mathnewi itself is an endless source for inspiration. Is an endless source for inspiration, and people looking for inspiration in their spiritual journey, they go back to Rumi, they go back to Mathnewi, they go back to the stories shared by Rumi in his Mathnewi. And that's why he is an endless source of inspiration. It cannot be simply limited by a specific subject. It cannot be limited by a time period. It cannot be limited by a certain interpretation. It cannot be limited by a certain century or point of view. Mathnewi resembles the waters of Nile River, which refreshes everywhere, that it flows through. You know, it's like a river. So the water flows down, and every time you feel like the water will stop, it doesn't stop. There are more water coming down. There are more water coming. It's like the river of it's like the water of the Nile River. And Rumi actually says this in his Mathnewi as well. Mathnewi is like the water of Nile River. It will continue to influence people, and it will be a source of inspiration for centuries to come. So why is it still important? What is in Mathnewi? And Rumi's book, especially the Mathnewi, have quite impressive guiding facts, quite impressive stories, fables, remarks, advice, and commentaries on the Quran and the Sunnah. And there are so many important lessons to be drawn for administrators, for politicians, for lawyers, for students, for teachers, for normal human beings. There are so many important lessons that we can draw from Mathnewi and apply them to our lives. And so any person, any individual reading the Mathnewi will come across many topics, including the law, human rights, courts, testimony, justice, crime, qualifications of teachers, qualifications of a ruler, characteristics of an honest human being. He talks about love. He talks about love for Allah. He talks about love for the Prophet. He talks about patience during hardships, how to be patient, how to overcome difficulties. He talks about friendships. He talks about choosing the right friends, and he shares so many stories and fables about importance of friendship. So that's why Rumi's book cannot be limited by a specific subject, or it cannot be limited by a century. And that's why Rumi's book, Rumi's stories, still can be examined and studied today in the field of sociology, in the field of psychology, in the field of human rights, in the field of management sciences. And these are important lessons that are in Mathnewi, and and they can be easily studied even today. And how does Rumi give his messages? How does he convey his messages? He usually gives his messages through stories, fables, and metaphors. And that's why we should keep in mind, when we read a story from Mathnewi, when we share a story from Mathnewi, these are not just simple stories. He does not simply share stories. When he shares a story, when he writes down a fable, there is always a message. There is always a moral code that Rumi wants to convey. There is always a wisdom. There is always a message desired to be conveyed to people. And that's why Rumi always said, this is not a book to be memorized. This is a book for spiritual ladder. This is a book for understanding. So when we read a poem, when we read a poetry from Mathnewi, when we read a fable, there's always a moral code, moral message that Rumi wants to convey, and look for that message. Don't read at the superficial level. Look for the deeper meaning of the story. And in addition, there is always a soul. There is a soul, there is a special emotion that Rumi wants to convey, and this soul that also needs to be felt by the reader. And that's why these stories, these fables, are always used to convey the relevant message, the relevant important moral code, and the soul, the emotion. And for this reason, Rumi, when he starts his first story in the Mathnewi, he says this, now here's a tale for you to contemplate. Now I tell you a story. Now I tell you a fable. Now it's a time for you to think. Don't read the story at the superficial level. Here is the time for you to think. Here is the time for you to ponder on the story. And he says, it tells the truth about our present state. So the story that I will be talking about will talk about the human nature. It will talk about you. It will not be something irrelevant. It will be something very relevant to your life, to your human experience. So when you read our stories in Mathnewi, take lessons from them. Look for the spiritual meaning that we want to convey to you. In other place, Rumi also talks about this again. Oh brother, the story that we share in the Mathnewi is like a measure. The real meaning in it resembles grain. The man of intelligence will take the grain of meaning. He will not pay any regard to the measure, even if it is removed altogether. He says, the story is like a measure, and the real meaning in it resembles the grain. So let's think about the grain, or let's think about milk. So when we want to get the milk, or when we want to get the gold, how do we get it? We need some sort of tools. We need some cups, or we need some measuring tools. And with these tools, we are able to get the milk. We get the cup and we get the milk. So when you get the cup and when you have milk in it, don't look at the cup. The cup is a tool. The cup is a vehicle for you to get the milk. The real meaning, the real essence, the real important thing for you is the milk. So the man of intelligence, an intelligent man, will not look at the superficial level. He will not look at the outside value. He will look for the deeper meaning. There is a milk in it. The milk will benefit you. Don't look at the outside value. Don't look at the measure. And the man of intelligence will not pay any regard to the measure. The man of intelligence, an intelligent man, will not pay attention to the outside value. He will not pay attention to the superficial level. He will look for the deeper meaning. So he makes this comparison. Rumi makes this comparison for his stories. He says, when you listen to our stories, don't look for the letter, don't look for the voice, don't look for the word, don't look for the rhyme and couplet. Look for the deeper meaning, so you may get the real meaning. He says, now when you listen to our stories, remove the letter, remove the voice, remove the word, so you may get the real meaning. So when we read a story from Mathnewi, we may become amazed, we may become surprised. And you may love the poetry, you may love the story, you may love the characters in the story. But don't be obsessed with the poetry. Don't be obsessed with the rhyme and couplet. Look for the meaning that Rumi wants to convey to you. Again, Rumi warns people about this. Whoever reads the Mathnewi as an idle tale, he is an idle tale. And whoever regards it as a money, as a precious thing in his own hands, real truth to be applied to himself, is like a man of God. So whoever reads the Mathnewi as a simple story, he will only get the benefit of reading a simple story. But whoever regards the stories shared in Mathnewi as something important, as something precious, then he will become like man of God. He will climb on the ladder of spiritual ladder. So this is the message that Rumi wants to convey. So today we spent time on the importance of Mathnewi, why Mathnewi was regarded as an important source of inspiration throughout the centuries, and I would like to conclude here. And all praises are for Allah, the Lord of mankind, and He is the giver of all good things. And we ask Allah, we ask our Lord that He destroys the wall of enmity and grant us peace in this world. Today we suffer from wars of ethnic and national interest, and we pray that Allah brings peace to our lives. And we pray for your peace and mercy in the midst of great suffering that we are facing today. فقالوا على الله توكلنا ربنا لا تجعلنا فتنة للظالمين وَنَجِّنَا بِرَحْمَتِكَ مِنَ الْقَوْمِ الْكَافِرِينَ صدق الله العظيم. And we conclude with a special performance from our brother Hamza Castro.